Tave Rising.
Yay! Woo! It is July. Oh my god.
Is it July 1st?
Yeah, it's July 1st today.
Wow.
It's crazy. July 1st, 2024. Wowzers. Lots happening this year. And Justine just came out of a journey, root bark journey, and is bursting with downloads and insights and visions to share and plug in pieces for all of us as we continue to map out what is happening here on Earth and remembering where we're from, what we're doing here, our missions, our collective intent. I mean, this is a universal scale event and upgrade that we are here on Earth facilitating. And the way that we look at these journeys and processes is that every time one of us can go within and have this depth of experience, then we can bring that down and share it. And it kind of looks to me visually like plugging in these little puzzle pieces into our field. And so where there's these missing spots and gaps, we can start to fill those areas in with this information. And if it seats automatically. It's not like something we need to process mentally. Most of the communication is happening non-verbally. And it's, these downloads are frequency waves that come through and plug in and flesh out our comprehensive, wisdom and capacity to heal Earth and then propel the upgrades into the greater universe. So that's the preamble, and I'll let you take it away.
This will be part 1 of a 3-part series, and I want to open by talking about what does kind of seem to be a unique ability to recall, and share some information around that, and maybe even some of you will get some activations from this so that you can work on that if that's something that you're interested in. And something that I got during the experience about, how am I able to so clearly have this information be stored and then I'm able to recall it later. A big part of that is our meditation practice. So Zane and I together have been meditating every day for 6 or 7 years now. And
I've only missed like a few hundred.
While the practice does, of course, ebb and flow because we have all kinds of things going on in our lives, it has remained a very consistent part of the past 6 to 7 years. And meditation is something that I always recommend to people. I think it's such an incredible way to process and to learn. And it also really teaches us how to observe ourselves, how to be a witness, which so many teachers and books and people talk about this phenomenon. And so I'm just adding to that voice that, yes, it is highly effective to be able to simultaneously be the being that is experiencing something and the being that is observing what is being experienced and then naming it. And so I think that practice is a really cultivated part of this ability to witness what's going on in a journey space and record it. And I'll talk about the new way that I discovered to record it last night, which was really amazing. And then I've also had a dream journal since I was 9 years old. And I think that is such an effective way to have recall of the sub and unconscious activities of the mind and can really help people have recall in a state like this as well if you have a dream practice.
And that obviously being such a focal point of this medicine is, very significant because it's the unconscious patternings that rule most of our lives when we really break it down. That's where the matrix is seated.
Right.
So.
And that's what this work is clearing out and letting us reclaim as part of ourselves. And with dream work, just write down one impression. It could be one word every day if you want to start a dream journal. It's very simple. You don't have to have total recall to begin the practice, and then it just spins out from there. Another aspect is that I am already a visual thinker. I don't typically think in words. I think more in pictures. And so my ability to translate imagery into words is part of just my own attunement because of the way that I perceive information and process information. And so a lot of journeys, if they're visual, learning how to encapsulate a visualization into a word or a phrase is really, really helpful. So with that, I can talk a little bit about the technique that I use, which is you have this experience, you get all of this information, and I'm trying to remember it, but it's obviously it would take so much more vocabulary than a single word or phrase. And so I try to encapsulate the information into a single word or phrase that will trigger my recall as I'm reading, as I'm doing now. There's a list of words here, and it will take me back into that kind of memory. And then what I learned on the medicine was that I can encode those words into my fingertips. So I can send the word frustrated about with an arrow pointing towards the word hook into my pinky finger. And then I can, into my ring finger, put the word AI cards and have these things. And then, you only have 10 fingers, and then I just overlap. And then you could even go like, okay, what are the 2 or 3 things on my left pinky finger? And it just felt like a really amazing way to not just have this like 30 line long list. It was encoded into my body. So maybe that's something you guys can try. And the final piece that I'll say about that is, or another practice that you could try, is something that I refer to as inside-outside observer. And one thing to think about is, from somebody else's perspective, what is going on in your life. And instead of thinking about like, okay, I'm the observer of my own life experiencing it, one way to do that is just recall your past year and pull out key points. Because when we're in an experience, when we're in our life, when we're engaged in our emotional body, it's hard to have that outside perspective. And so if you don't have that practice yet of like, oh, I'm going to name what's happening, you can retroactively go back and think about, okay, if I was somebody else looking in, what was going on with this experience? And so that practice you can just do in daily life to help kind of cultivate that ability.
It's raining.
It's raining.
You were calling the rain.
I was. Yesterday there was thunder, but no rain.
It just was delayed. Delayed
to the recording.
Rain in the desert. but yeah, just to echo that, it's like the way that we can always see patterns in other people, but it's so hard to see them in ourselves, and that's the tool set that you're talking about, right? It's like,
yeah, it's important and it's difficult. So then we can get into the first part of this experience that I'll share. It's not all chronological. I pulled out things that made more sense to talk about together in this series. And so this is kind of all about feelings and finding the root of a wound and the place in our system where infiltration is hooked in that continues to activate the mental body when we go through an emotional process and then keeps you looping. And so this is something that I have been really honing in on for a couple of years, and I feel like this understanding of feelings and looping and hooks is expanding still, and I'm excited to go more into it. So this is just from the journey experience. And the onset of it, so this is chronological, in the beginning, I started looping right away. I wasn't even really fully in an experience yet. And the emotion that was associated with it that I've been working on for the past couple months is frustration. And I don't know about you guys, but I am frustrated about the way things are. That is the root of the wound that is hooked into the emotion of frustration. And I have been frustrated about the way things are my entire life. If I think about from a recall perspective, like what was my awakening event, I didn't have one. Of course, it's a process that's expanded so much. So there are series of events that have propelled me into where I am now. But my whole life, I've had this frustration about the way things are. And I think a lot of us feel that way, or at least have, recently. And I found that because in the loops are mental overlays that keep the nervous system pumping energy from an emotional response when you tell a story about something. So for example, with frustration, at first I was feeling really frustrated. And what the mental overlay wants to do is tell a story about why I'm frustrated because blank didn't do blank, or I need blank to do this, or I need whatever it is. And then you might get stuck in one of those loops, or the loop hooks in another loop that is another story about the same emotion, maybe a different context, and it continues. And then it's this bigger loop where you're telling every single story that you've ever felt frustrated by to yourself to keep the frustration siphoning energy and feeding the AI implant hook that we'll talk about in the next episode. But yeah, feeding parasites. And so the process with finding, it's really important to learn how to trace an emotion and find the root of the emotion. And from the root, it's like pulling a weed, but you didn't pull the root out, it will keep growing. It's the same thing with emotional triggers from hooks in our system that get hooked in from a wound or a trauma experience. And so when you notice yourself, again, this is the observer ability, feeling something that's really hitting your system. Like, I'm not just a little bit frustrated because I'm trying to open this umbrella that's stuck. I'm like frustrated about a big situation. My system is hit, feels like a punch, you're in this emotional response. Let the loop come in, but move deeper and try to trace, when is the first time I ever felt this? And do a memory recall exercise. And maybe you don't get to the first time, but you get to like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, your early childhood. You find, wow, when I was 8 years old was the first time I really had this feeling, and I can bring that memory to surface. And it could also just be stored in your body, so you could locate it in your body without tracing the memory. That's another way to do it. And in that place, whether it's the memory of the experience or a place in your body or your field, that is the initial core wound experience. And that's where the parasite is hooked into. So again, you don't have to re-experience something. You can just find where it's hooked in your body. Both are effective. And for things like being frustrated about the way things are, that I don't have a earliest memory of frustration because I came in with it. So I have been frustrated about the situation on this planet and the multidimensional scene for a very, 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 you could use long time or just whatever existence. And it's something that I'm so excited to learn how to clear, because frustration doesn't serve anything. And
it serves the parasites.
Right, exactly.
Frustration is one of the loops you just described, right? So yes,
right.
In that context, right, it's like accessing that infiltration, that core infiltration in your field from whatever point it occurred in your life that then may have been reinforced over and over again through other life circumstances. Like you had a boss at work, or there was a teacher at school, or it was something with one of your parents or a friend, and this thing that would circle up and up until it became entrenched in your field, where that's where the energy circuit starts to run almost automatically, and you have to actually be that observer and catch it. Otherwise it will spin you and convince you that the narrative that you're overlaying onto your reality field is actually real when in fact it's just an overlay.
Right. But it's a deeply entrenched overlay, and that's where if you've cleared that deeply entrenched overlay, if you can feel the same emotion without getting hit. So with frustration, an example would be that moving forward, I'm trying to, build something, and 3-dimensional construction is frustrating. And I do get frustrated because it is frustrating, but it doesn't send me into a tailspin looping mechanism in my mental body. So it's very clear. You'll know I have healed that wound because I can feel lonely, shame, guilt, despair, whatever the experience is, because we are here to feel. That is just so key. And we'll get into that. But that's the goal, is to let yourself be able to feel the full spectrum of emotions, whether you've historically labeled them as good or bad, because that is the primary way that we learn in this system, is through feeling. And it's highly important for the attunement of our species to be able to feel because of love. And love is not a way of showing it. So the whole love language phenomenon, while it may tell somebody that you're showing them love, if you don't feel love from them, their gift or their act of service or whatever the other love languages are irrelevant. Love itself as a pure frequency that all of creation, organic creation, can feel is enough. That is better than any gift you can give, any act of service you can do. All it is something for you to beam out to the world. And that is so vital, and it sounds so hokey because so many books and things like, oh, at the end of the day it's love, but it's true. That is the true attunement, and it's through no act, no experience. It's through your heart, it's through feeling. And that's where really healing our emotional bodies and separating it out from the mental looping architecture is vital to develop sensitivity enough to perceive love and know that that is enough.
Yeah, it's such a big one because there are so many mental programs that claim to be love or based in love that lack that feeling component. And this is kind of the classic, like, Christian or Buddhist or, you know, a lot of religions, even just like well-to-do secular people who are out there doing good deeds. You know, you can spend all day at the soup kitchen and be internally in a mental state of torment and misery. And yeah, you're doing a good deed, quote unquote. And when people look at you, they're like, wow, you're so selfless. Like, you really must feel a lot of love for, you know, but it's like the external reference is not the piece that matters. And I think all of us who have been through this cleanse process have been gifted a recalibration about what real unconditional love feels like. And it's not formulaic, and it doesn't fit a certain blueprint, and you're not going to get external gratification and credit for it in the same way you would if you're doing the correct program that's been approved by society. And it's, you know, one of the things that I think misleads so many people is in the attempt to grasp at service, they do what's proper and what's expected of them. And this is where so many distortions then get anchored, like with virtue signaling, or, you know, things that happened during the whatever pandemic. And, you know, all these people are doing what's virtuous because they've been told that's what's virtuous, and then they're enforcing their virtue over others. And the actual core emotion there is a lot closer to fear, like hatred, separation, really nasty things. But superficially, the mind overlays have been able to convince them that they are doing, you know, the Lord's work, doing good in the world. And so, yeah, I think this is an absolutely crucial download and calibration that truly you have to experience to then be able to emulate. Mm-hmm. And it's a plug for the cleanse. It's a plug for also just being in a field of unconditional love whenever possible. But it's something we're able to open in that space specifically.
Yeah. And that is a really big aspect of this process, is the field of love for that core activation. Because and I said this in a previous episode, I think recorded in South Africa, all emotions can be traced back to love or the lack of return flow of love. And so you can always go back to that place. I'm frustrated about the way things are because I love this planet so much. And that core beingness of love that's what I want to tune into, not the frustration. And that's what this is all about. And Zane also mentioned unconditional love, and unconditional love is different from love. And the whole love language thing, expressing love through acts, is conditional, because that shows that, oh, if I don't receive gifts, I don't feel love from you. That's a condition. That's a need that you have, instead of letting yourself open to the unconditionality of love. Love as a pure frequency energy is unconditional for all of creation. And it's something that you can express through things that you say and do, absolutely. But the core of it is a feeling. And that feeling is enough to give. So another emotion I was going through, aside from frustration, was feeling that I am unreliable as a person, which I have never articulated to myself before this experience. And I could just feel how I am not able to meet the needs of a lot of people that I love very, very much. And I want in the core of my being to be able to be present with each and every one of them every single day and really do what they think is needed. And as I was going through this, feeling like, wow, I feel unreliable, but isn't my love enough for them? And that is the activation that every child and every adult needs to feel, that your love for someone is enough. It's more important than anything that you do for them. And that person may be filled with distortions and that they may project needs onto you that you cannot meet. But you need to know that your pure, unconditional love, that feeling that you have for them, that you can send to them from any remote area in the world, is enough. And their projected needs are theirs to own and won't heal even if you provide them. So somebody who's very needy, or someone who's not even very needy, but occasionally wants something, that won't just go away by giving it to them once. And so your ability to just love someone, eventually they will be able to feel that, and they will feel the power of that. And even if people shy away from it because it's an intense energy to feel unconditional love when you don't have the self-worth to let yourself receive that, eventually it comes in for that person. And for me, this is personal because I've had multiple people in my life tell me that when they feel me, I have capital B big love, and they can feel my love. And that's because that's the aspect of unconditional love that I have for them. And I also know that that can be triggering for people too when they have a overlaid need, say like a weekly phone call or something that I'm not meeting, and it's confusing to the system, and the parasitic overlays want to convince that person that that big love energy is like, it's the sun, it's intense, it's just a lot, like there's energy there, that there's something not resonant for that person because these other overlaid criteria aren't being met, or the person doesn't have the self-worth to receive love. And so, yeah, your love is enough for all of the people in your life, and it's not anything you need to do for them. It's just an energy that you can broadcast to them anytime you feel like it.
And yeah, love as the steady state backbone of creation, as the energetics that propel creation into being in the first place, is available to every organic being. And so I think the access to the love that Justine is talking about is via clarity. And clarity, again, circles back to meditation, or working, especially I think with this medicine in particular, the way that it can clear distortions and overlays. And so then instead of this endless hunt and pursuit of love, it's not like something you have to seek and find and attach to. It's there. It's already there. It's what you're made out of. And you clear enough layers of distortion out, and then underneath is the real you, and it's automatically beaming love. And then when you go into the world, beings feel that, and it's magnetic and it's super attractive. And you'll find, as many of us have found, that certain individuals will want to spend every possible waking minute with you. And it's, that tempering of letting the field interaction guide another being to show them the way to access that within themselves, instead of attempting to feed off it from you. Because the only reason why you're able to beam that love out is because you've done the hard work of clearing the overlays and distortions. And this is such a key thing, especially in the world of plant medicine right now. We're interfacing with it very directly. So many people are seeking a union with God or something of that sort, a union with Source, and that degree of love, the love Justine's talking about, a beautiful intention, and definitely, not something we would ever disparage or talk down. But if you want to anchor that in your daily life, in every waking moment of your life, you have to do the hard work of clearing the distortions and overlays, which cloud that as like a foggy window. If we're all windows into the Creator, into the creation, then all of these mental programs and loops and overlays are layers of fog or paint or something over that window that cloud it out and, basically siphon away that clarity and resolve in beings that are programmed and stuck in, their own patterns of struggle and strife. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and what Zane was talking about too, with people being magnetized towards the love, it's so evident with children. When you are around children, do they just walk over to you and get glued onto you? Because they can perceive distortions and unconditional true love so quickly. And it's something that I experience with my school when I go there. The welcoming that I get doesn't make sense for the amount of time that I spend there. And one of my employees even said, it doesn't make sense that the kids love you so much. And it's because they can feel my love for them, and then it's reciprocal. And that's what happens too, what Zane's talking about when you clear distortions, and it's so much easier with children. That's why I love working with children, because they don't really have the overlays quite yet, or it's so easy to just cut through them. So that reciprocity of love, between adults and children is just so pure and fantastic and amazing, and such a great calibration to be able to experience. And with that idea that your love beaming out from your heart for all those to encounter, your love is enough, is understanding the concept of synchronization, because we have this fantastic overlay called a schedule, a calendar, an agenda, and Zane and I are in eternal confusion and frustration and humor around it, and mostly frustration and being challenged by it. But what I was seeing, because something that makes me feel unreliable is my inability to commit to a plan with somebody, or wanting to change the plan, or just making no plans because I want an open schedule, whatever it is. And instead of engaging with the overlay of scheduling and a plan, it's this idea of synchronicity. And the image that I got was these two little things on a pivot, and they're moving of their own accord, like 180 degrees. And if you were to watch this over time, eventually they would sync up for a while, the two little sticks moving. And then they would get out of sync. And then they would sync up. And then they would get out of sync. And that's all relationships are moments of synchronization and moments where you're out of sync. And it does not mean that there isn't love there. Just because I wasn't able to make our 3:00 lunch date doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means we're out of sync. And really honoring everybody's synchronization and flow in life. And historically, unless it was a village setting, but if you had long distance friends before cell phones and airplanes, you didn't communicate or see them very often at all, and that was okay. You maybe would see them every 10 years, and it was like, wow, this is somebody that I love. And so we've had this majorly overlaid system that we're supposed to spend all of this time with our friends and our family and our loved ones, and that's how you show your love. But again, just the feeling of love is enough, and knowing that sometimes you synchronize and sometimes you don't synchronize.
It's funny. Like, this happens to me almost on a daily basis now, where I think of somebody, or I think of 50 people, whatever it is, and I'm sending them a little ping, you know, I'm like, wow, I really care about you. And our relationship means so much to me, and you're totally invited to this thing that I'm doing, like tonight or whenever. And you know, then that evening or the next day, I'm like, oh, I never like actually texted them or sent them a message via digital communication. It was like purely a telepathic ping. And it's not like I'm expecting that people are like, oh, I got your message telepathically. I mean, that's coming, but you know, it's not here yet. But it's just what Justine is talking about. And you know, one of the patterns that we struggle with is maintaining so many friendships and relationships in a way that they're still deeply meaningful on both sides, and yet to honor and respect our own need for time and space to be alone and be on our own process. The only reason why people want to spend time with us, the only reason why people want to spend time with anybody who emanates a degree of love or clarity, is because of the hard work that they've done in solitude, you know. And you're not going to do a medicine journey like this in the middle of a party. You know, you wouldn't. That would be ludicrous. And in the same way, you know, having a daily meditation practice, or taking the time to go and spend, you know, some time in the mountains or on the river, or, you know, those are things that work for us. Maybe it's something different that works for you, but the constant socialization and constant communication is ultimately a distraction mechanism that feeds AI. And it's not, to say that sounds harsh, because the real bond that exists underneath the overlaid communication technologies is absolutely legitimate and precious. And it's the reason why we're here, and we're sharing our downloads and discoveries and piecing all these things together. And it's a beautiful thing to do in community and with friends and family and loved ones. But then on top of that, when you pull out your phone and you stare at that screen, where are you? Ask yourself, next time you do it, you'll realize you just phased out of this reality, and you were in a digital construct reality for that moment. And so it doesn't negate the heartfelt intention. I can still send you a text message and have it be filled with love, and you receive that communication, and the message is just the superficial carrier. But be realistic. Like, it's okay to be honest with others and to say, look, I care so much about you, but I haven't reached out in a month. You know,
and that's okay.
That's okay.
Because your love that you have for that person is enough. That is, just tell yourself that every day for the rest of your life. My love is enough. And this is something that Zelkia says all the time that came in, and I didn't really realize how powerful it is. She says, "You guys, thank you for loving me. For me, really?" But it's like she's acknowledging that our love is enough. And that's epic because, think about like a child who didn't do the dishes and you're reprimanding them because they didn't do the dishes, and you're communicating to them that their love isn't enough. It doesn't mean children shouldn't have responsibility and shouldn't get reprimands. Okay, boom, boom.
Oh, thunder.
But with that, it's acknowledging I can feel your love, and that's so fantastic. And in 3D reality, we all have to pitch in to these chores. But really saying thank you for loving me. So everybody who loves me out there, thank you for loving me. That is the biggest gift I could get from you ever. And I love the time we spend together and always wish there's more. And I'm just so grateful for that. And on that note of gratitude and unconditional love, and Zane mentioned the word space and taking space, holding space for somebody else is an incredibly high form of love. And so this applies to any relationship, but is really important in romantic relationships because of the tendency to merge or become too enmeshed, codependency, and you're not holding space for each other. And I told Zane today that the first cleanse he helped to facilitate for me, I had never felt that level of love from him before in our entire 12 years together because of the space he gave me. There was no canoodling. There was no anything about our relationship. It was pure, unconditional love, and knowing that this is for Justine. This process is for her to go through what she needs to go through so that she can heal, and that will help the relationship. And relationships where you can hold space for each other and give each other space are the strongest relationships. And whether that's friends or family or a loved one, the more you can do, that is you could call it an act of love that demonstrates or conveys your unconditional love for the person, and is so important, and it's very hard to do. It's hard to give somebody space without taking it personally and thinking they're taking space from me because they don't like me. But you need to honor that they have things they need to work through that have nothing to do with you, or maybe they do, but it's something for them to work out on their own. And when you give them that space, it just is precious and really amazing. And as I was thinking about this holding space concept, I was actually thinking about my mom, because my mom founded something called the Big Idea Institute and then the Innovation Institute at the University of Pittsburgh. And I was thinking about that and my experience, and how amazing to want to hold space for other people's ideas. And this is something that is also very challenging. How many times have you told someone that I want to start this business, I want to open a school, I want to build a house, and they're not able to hold space for your idea? And it's crushing. And think back to the first time you felt it. You were a child, some teacher told you were ridiculous or gave you an F or whatever it was, and nobody held space for your idea. And to be able to say that, my idea is actually to just elevate other people's ideas. way to go, Mom.
Mom.
Yeah.
My mom.
Go, my mom. And, it's beautiful to see people that you love in these ways. Because, of course, any relationship with a mom is complicated. But I love my mom. And being able to honor somebody's abilities in that way also is unconditional love. And on that note of I love my mom, during my journey, I wrote and illustrated an I love my mom children's book. And the mom voice that we're using is actually what we use for our kitty when she's following Mom, who is me, around the house and just spending the entire medicine journey on the bed with Mom and coming in when Mom needs her to. It's in activation, and it's so silly, and people think my obsession with kitties and Buzz is like so over the top, and it totally is. I'm totally one of those people. But she has taught me that my love is enough. Just loving her, she gives it back to me. She loves Mom. And even though she had to live with my parents for 6 years and we leave every other week for a week and we bring her onto the house, but we do these ridiculous things, just the love is enough. And animals, everyone who has an animal knows exactly what I'm talking about. That is the frequency of unconditional love, where your love for that being and their love for you, boom, boom, is enough in that relationship.
That was like punctuation.
Boom. So good.
Yeah, and it's because animals don't have overlays the way that humans do. So reciprocating love is quite simple. Energetically, it's quite simple. It's not getting siphoned into all of these traps that then invert it and connect into wounds and say, you need to, fill these voids in my field and my body because I have a lack, and you're gonna, fulfill this need. And it doesn't get contorted and distorted and wrapped around into all these complexes. It's just like, wow, that feels good, I'll give that one back, and there's not even thought. It's feeling.
Yeah, it bypasses thought because it's feeling. And that's why, again, the healing of feeling is so important, okay? And it's essential to let yourself experience. And that's what we're doing here, is the healing of feeling. Wow, that's so great. Let's call this the healing of feeling. And with all of this, all this information, what I was visualizing is the restoration of the archetypal woman. And if you've consumed or read, shouldn't use the word consumed, if you've read the Anastasia material, some people, when they talk about the Anastasia material, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look up the Ringing Cedars series books by Vladimir Magray and Anastasia. And some people complain about those books because they feel like Anastasia is Vladimir Magray's sort of fantasizing of like the ideal woman, and a lot of what she describes as this like unconditionally giving woman, a lot of women are triggered by because of their overlays. And when a woman is truly an embodiment of unconditional love, the response is that she wants to give. And that archetype of mother, of woman, we need to restore. And we are going far down a road away from woman. And of course, have there been archetypes of womanhood that were totally distorted? Absolutely. But I'm talking about the blueprint. Maybe that's a better word for it. The blueprint of a female, feminine embodiment of love is a unique thing. And there is a male embodiment of love. And biological male or female aside, you can have both or be more attuned to one or the other. It's irrelevant. But for me, as a feminine, and I've been working on femininity for 2 years and really connecting with my womanhood, that restoration of feminine beauty and love, I mean, wow. When you have felt an embrace by a soft woman with her heart totally open, there's nothing more delicious in the world. I mean, it's like, oh, I could become a stick of melted butter. And that is what we are restoring. And it ties to a later episode that I'm really excited to do around beauty and body image, and hoping to help us as collective women heal all of the distortions there, because they're so deep and intense. But that archetype of a woman, that blueprint of a woman, carries all of the codes for beauty and grace, elegance, unconditional love, giving. I mean, it's truly unconditional. And it's a very exciting thing for us to attune to in this moment as we talk about the restoration, the divine masculine, the divine feminine, they're all coming in. And we really can only do that if we truly tune into that archetype or blueprint.
And, I actually, as a man, know all the answers to how to be a perfect woman. I'm just kidding. I also know how to melt butter really well. But, then as a man, right, restoring our blueprints, so where do we fit into that? Like, creation to me has a very feminine spin to it inherently, because it's the birthing process. And so as a man, how can we support the re-entry into the purity of that frequency? And so much of Justine and my own relationship has been about resolving these things, because so many women living in a patriarchal system, where the marketplace and politics and all of these systems are dominated by men and masculinity and these overbearing mental complexes and overlays of competency and confidence. That those imprints get absorbed, especially women who then interface with these systems in the workplace, or you become a politician or a lawyer or whatever it is, it's necessary and admirable to bring that frequency, but it's not to bring the frequency into those spaces as a competitive version of, like competing with the masculine patriarchal archetypes. The thing to bring into those spaces is that love and that warm melted butter feeling, where you can walk into the middle of a room where the energy is totally parasitic and toxic and competitive and all of the things that our political and economic systems are. And instead of, biting right in and, fending for your turf and being the big dog or the toughest one there, you infuse that whole space with a field of love. And it actually flips the spell, the parasitic spell that's being cast in that field at that time can be righted from its inverted state into a field of love and expression where real communication can take place. And, instead of just all these talking heads trying to bite each other's head off, it becomes this actual heartfelt communication where messages are actually absorbed and interpreted, and there's movement. And that's how we move through. All of the systems that we have in our world are stagnating. They're stuck, and we're watching them fall apart because they don't function. And so as men, whether we want to embody more of that as where we interact in the world, or whether we want to create space for our feminine counterparts to, infuse those areas, there's a huge role there. And, we don't need to go into then the like correcting the masculine archetype, because that's a whole other hour.
We should, though. That would be a really fantastic episode to do to pair with this one. And I just want to, the word competency stuck out to me because yesterday before my journey, I released a worm, and the worm was my need for others to see me as competent and my fear of other people seeing me as incompetent. And it's totally a masculine energy, because competency is I know how to do everything. And true inner competency is knowing that I can ask for help or call people in or learn something new. I don't already have to know how to do all of these things. And this fear that I had of people needing me needing other people to see me as competent results in so much domestic dysfunction too, around fear of trying something new because I might suck at it, or needing to feel like I have my shit together or be organized and things like that. And it was a massive thing and a calibration towards the feminine, which is like, I don't know, will you help me? And you don't have to be the helpless maiden.
Damsel in distress.
I've learned, like, when I pull our little bean squadron up to the ramp at Lake Powell when I'm by myself, let a man do it. Why not? We have a finite amount of chi energy in these physical bodies. We're infinite in our energy bodies. But why not let people help us? And if you refuse to let people help you, where is that fear of them helping you coming from? That's a good thing to look at, because people like to feel good and be heroes, and why not?
Which there's a distinction from, let's say, like a 1950s era housewife of, like, I don't do anything, like, this is my boundaries, like, these are literally the gates of my existence, or my little fence or cage. I'm only domestic. It's not saying don't go and try things. Maybe you will go, do some construction or whatever, excavation, or you're going to like try to fix your truck or your vehicle, and you'll be like, wow, I really enjoyed that. I think I'll do it again. I don't care if I'm the best at it. Nobody's the best at anything they try the first time. But what Justine is talking about is, if you have tried those things and you're like, like, maybe that's not my strength, and I'll leave it to someone else. Or like, maybe this is something where a man has a more natural inclination, to then actually give the space for a man, whether that's your partner or somebody else in your life, to do that is so gratifying for them. And, I don't know, I'm sure most of us have had an experience where you like have a flat tire or something on the side of the road, or you get stuck in your car or something like that, and some dude comes along and tows you out, or whatever it is, some little act of heroism, and he saves the day. And it's like, you can just feel how he's like, so like that little boy in him is just like, I did it, like, I'm so good, and I saved the day. And it's like, yeah, you did save the day, like, good job, buddy, that's awesome. And it's not something that we need to diminish through acting out of a competitive space. Like, everything doesn't need to be competitive between the genders. And of course this then plays into the transgenderism and all, on and on and on, the distortions and inversions. But if I'm really struggling with a fixed pattern in my field, and I'm like bottling it up and not communicating, and, stonewalling and everything, and doing the kind of like a tough man imprint overlay thing, that's when I need to turn to my partner as a woman and be like, can you help me through this? Because I'm stuck, and it's not to diminish like femininity, just to like that inherent emotional capacity, but it's one example of where, there are things, I think child rearing is another one. Like that flow of unconditional love is more easily accessed by women. Or being a nurse. I was thinking of nurses the other day. Like, it's been so distorted that a nurse is like giving these toxic injections to people, when in reality, what a selfless profession. Like that should be celebrated so much higher than a doctor or some expert, in a medical field. Like, who are the ones that are like cleaning up the shit, like for real. And so anyway, just to honor the natural roles that maybe some of us do feel like we're a woman with more of a, masculine inclination, or vice versa. Like, that's okay too, as long as it's coming from a genuine space and not coming from a competitive space, which is where I think so much of the distortions anchor.
Yeah. Yeah, or just, coming from the wounded space, from the place where there are hooks in the system. But absolutely, we're all divine masculine and feminine. That is truly there for us. And the final aspect of this healing of feeling episode is the feeling of neutrality towards another person. So I did, in my journey, as I typically do, I think of every single person that I know, and I work on them, and I beam them this unconditional love, and I give that as a gift. And there are some people that I have neutrality for, and I really just want to share this as a calibration, because the ultimate goal is to be able to feel unconditional love unconditionally to all humans. And so I just want to share where I'm at, which is there are a few people where it's totally neutral. I don't have any negative energy going towards them, but I'm at a place within myself and learning about self-respect where I don't need to intentionally broadcast love towards them. And when we interact and when things come up, that is the frequency that I attune to, is love. But yeah, there is neutrality there. And for me, that is the goal when there is kind of personal feelings of conflict or hurt, to just use the love to bring me to neutral so that I can calibrate and maybe eventually move past that. But I think neutrality is also a very high place of being, because you're not in some spectrum. You're not trying to, bring up your hurt and all of these things into the experience. And you're not trying to send something like love that's not reciprocal, which can be confusing to both of the beings. And so neutrality is a place to also attune to when there's somebody that there's confusion there and you don't feel that access.
Sacred neutral.
Yeah, sacred neutral. Sacred neutral. Yeah. And so, I think with that sums up this first part one.
Woohoo! So good.
First part one. That doesn't make
the first sense, part of the part.
The first part of the
part one.
Okay.
All right. Love you all. Woohoo!
Yay!